Well, good evening, people from all across Melbourne and wherever else Australia you do come from. It's a pleasure to have you here as as part of the Hive Buddies Show. Ryan, have I got you in there, mate? There we go. Whoa.
Hey, I'm here. Hi.
I've
just had something pop up on my screen saying my internet is unstable, so that's great. Perfect timing.
And Carmel's here. Greetings, Carmel, and welcome. Awesome to have you on board. I've just realised, I don't know, I've never really sat there and listened to the 10-minute quiet, calm, peaceful intro session. But this time I've just realised how different the restful 10 minutes is versus the last 15 seconds where we get that crazy music come back. Anyway, we push on.
It almost makes you feel like, like beekeeping is quite a beautiful, calm experience, right?
Up until such time as.
Up until the first.
That's exactly it. Oh, good work, internet.
Problem arrives, yeah. My internet, doesn't it?
Oh, look, as I said earlier, thank you to everyone for coming and joining us tonight. My name's Simon Mildren. I'm from HiveKeepers, and we're a beekeeping technology company based down here in Melbourne, Australia.
Oh.
Yeah.
No. My internet, I think I've just changed network. We're good? We're good? All right. Did you introduce me? I don't know. Do I need to introduce myself?
I would love you to introduce yourself. You just I've just told them how wonderfully clever we are by being a beekeeping technology company. And it's your turn now. Go.
Yeah. Well, clearly you're the technology company because mine is going downhill. I'm Ryan Moloney. I'm a beekeeper with Beachbox Honey down in the Mornington Peninsula, also Melbourne, Australia. And each Hive Buddies show, we get together and try to bring you a show that is a little bit informative, a little bit of fun, and on occasions it is downright weird.
Well, we've certainly got that bit down pat tonight, that's for sure. But each time we do this, we get help from one of our guest buddies. And for this particular session, we have Carmel Gerdsen joining us from CMG Honeybee. You're also absolutely awesome to have you here. We're privileged to have your excellency to join us.
I'm privileged to be here. It's great. I'm excited. Let's do it.
We are indeed, absolutely. No, and we'll loop back to you, Carmel, and we've got heaps to talk about with you tonight. I'm super excited about that. It's been a while though, Ryan, since we've put a show together. We've sort of had a bit of a gap there. I'm going to blame it on spring. That's what some people do. I'm going to do the same. We've all been busy people, I guess.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I suppose that works into last week. I mean, the last show, which was a month ago, and we were talking about swarms. And I don't know about you, mate, but there has been plenty of swarms, and I've been picking up a few, I tell you. Yeah.
I have absolutely no doubt at all. I've been trying to stay well clear of that because I know how time-consuming it gets, but everyone is in an absolute frenzy in the southern states of Australia, certainly getting on top of that. I've noticed that. And Carmel, I know you've been particularly flat out with that sort of activity at the moment as well.
Yeah, very much so. Have been caught unawares, and I feel like everything that I knew has been thrown out the window, and I'm learning new stuff. The bees are teaching me new stuff.
That is absolutely what it's all meant to be about. Now, since our last session too, Ryan, we haven't had a huge amount of feedback or anything that people have wanted to query or challenge us with, but we do remind.
We must have got it all right, yeah?
Well, that's questionable. But we do like to point out to people at this point in time, we do like to hear from you. So if you think that there's something that we've not been correct with, that happens. If you think there's something that you need to steer us to point us in the right direction to learn more, this is all about a learning journey. So make sure you point that out. And one of the ways you can also do that immediately right now is in the little chat box down the side, wherever you've got that. Those that are here with us tonight can actually ask some questions relevant to what we're talking about. So if something stands out in your mind, go on, give it a go and just ask a question and away we go. But Ryan, our first traditional step for the night is to come to you and see what revelation you've had in recent times. What have you got for us, mate?
Right. Okay. So this show's revelation is actually about the last one was actually kind of following your own journey and really enjoying learning, and this one is kind of in a similar vein, but actually kind of enjoy acknowledging what you're learning. So noticing what you're learning, because I mean, this is all a journey for us. And there's like Carmel said, you've been beekeeping for quite a while and you're still learning. They're teaching you new stuff. So, and it's just that thing of actually noticing what it is that you're actually learning along the way. Things like there's a whole heap down in the Mornington Peninsula. There's a whole heap of tea tree that has been in flower. It has been absolutely pumping. And I took a kind of, a semi-drawn out, it's got a little bit of nectar in it, stuff like that, a box that was pretty empty in it. And I put it to the side in one of my apiaries. And then the next thing I turn around and I go, why is there so many bees robbing it? There's a whole bunch of tea tree that should be in flower and the nectar, should be kind of pumping. And then over the next few days and the week, I just kind of thought, oh, hang on a second. Yeah, if I'm looking in my hives, I'm noticing the rate of which that nectar is coming in has really dropped off. So it's kind of like, oh, okay, so we've got a flow that's actually stopping. And so, they're starting to rob whatever's easiest. So, that's kind of an interesting thing to just kind of note, to when flows start and when they stop.
Can I tell you something to support that? And it's something that I certainly wasn't I've not usually been very good at being able to pick the flows and understand a whole lot. Maybe I'm just not attentive enough. Maybe I don't spend enough time thinking about it, but I've not been so good at it. But something that, like the technology side of what I do is interesting. And what I would have traditionally thought would have perhaps brought on a week or two of a flow over the last 2 weeks with what I'm observing outside and how I've conducted myself with bees in the past, similar to you, I'm watching beehive scales, the weight of the actual the beehives, going down quite quickly in southeastern Melbourne at the moment, and even out in the Yarra Valley where it can be, well, it depends on what's happening locally, but there's not many sites that I've got where the honey is actually coming in and increasing at the moment. So I would have just assumed that it was, but without that visibility, without going and checking, it's been really interesting. So yeah, it's hard to stay on top of it. I don't know how you do it because you seem to be pretty attentive to that sort of thing.
Well, mate, I've been going, how do I do it? Is I spend a bloody long time actually going around and checking every hive.
There you go.
But yeah, so that's that one. You've actually got the data to back that up, which is really good. So that's, tick. We're learning. And the other thing too is, so this is my second season of grafting, and I wasn't going to do it this year, but I actually had customers from last year, customers and friends who had my queens last year, and they were all kind of ringing me up saying, "Hey, you got any more?" They're almost complaining that their hives are exploding. So I was kind of like, okay, all right, well, perhaps I did something right there, so that's good. So I thought, okay, I better get onto it and start again. And I reckon this time around, this first grafting session, I actually really feel like I know how every little larvae was actually handled. I know that 2 of them are probably handled pretty averagely, but across the board, out of 40, I know the other 38 were pretty damn good. And how they went in, how they came out, how they went in, and how they were placed, the sides and everything like that. And it's kind of like, okay, I've given them the best chance of actually going into the hive. And now we'll see, whether or not I've actually set up the hive properly to actually make them, to build them really well. But I know they've gone in really, really well. So that's a really good, important learning, stepping stone in terms of, making queens and learning along the way. So that's good.
Well, I intend to ask a question of you next time of how they went. So get that feedback so we can share that here and hear how you went. So I've just called you the attentive beekeeper. So I'm requiring you to do dial out and get that feedback to us, because it's always interesting to hear, like, did what you thought happened and how it went actually, is that what came through? Because bees, Carmel, as you've already said, sometimes you can get surprised, can't you? It's just the way it works. But cool.
What about you, mate? What's your part in this little duo trio is to delve into the world of your strange brain?
It's not my strange brain. I suppose it is my strange brain, because I'm the one that wants to go and learn these things and follow the wormhole. I've got 2. The first one is only just linked to beekeeping, or even just at a thin thread only. But do you know much
That's
about?
all right, that's fine.
It's all good. I'm going with it. Do you know much about ancient Persians and how they like to dish out punishment to the worst of the criminals? Have you got much understanding of that one?
Oh, I don't know. I think I've seen, you know, what is it, 300? So,
Oh.
you know, the Persians kind of took on those Romans. They didn't treat them nicely. I'm assuming that that would be, you know, something similar.
Well, if you listen to all these ancient Persian philosophers and writers and kings, they've handed down all these stories. So I'm not even sure how true this is, but I like it anyway. So I was going to tell you about a common form of Persian execution. Don't know if I've got the name right, but called Scapism.
Okay.
Also commonly known as the boats. So I might just go with the boats because that's a bit easier. But so someone's done something terrible, and we'll come to what sort of thing in a minute, but it required the victim to lay down flat in a boat. And this seems like a drastic waste of boats, can I say? Another boat with holes on it was to allow for the victim's head and hands to protrude through. So there's a boat on a boat and your hands and your head are protruding through. It's weird already. And then
is it in the water?
The executioners were then, well, those that were to die were to then to drink a mixture of honey and milk. See, there's the link to honey. And they then covered the victim's exposed body parts with that same drink, the honey and the milk drink. It all sounds pleasant and sweet and lovely at the moment. Then the victim was left in the boat and nature took its course. So they had nowhere else to go. They had to lay there until they died. And that normally meant that what they'd consumed had to go somewhere as it came through the system. They had to lie there with the flies swarming their body. That would be awful, wouldn't it? I wonder if actually the bees came as well, if that's part of a story with that. I don't know. And they were left there until they were completely devoured. I'm just wondering who's eating dinner
until they
now.
were eaten. So they died, they decomposed, and everything just came along. And then they took the boat off.
Well, I guess you took the boat off to see not much left, maybe some bones. So there was this the Execution of Mithridates, and I've probably butchered that name as well. He was a soldier who was killed, he actually killed the brother of a Persian king. And this is back a while ago. This is 2,500.
That'll get you in trouble. Yeah.
And he was put to this sort of death, and it was 17 days that he was there for, still alive, whilst being pecked away at by who knows what. I'm seeing that the chat commentary is very quiet tonight, and I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that anyone's still watching. But that's not the one I really wanted to tell you about. That's just Simon Strange, curious brain, finding things that are a little bit unusual. Can I go another one?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm guessing that popped up during your honey recipe search, right?
Oh, I'll put that on there as a bit of a gag. So have you heard about the Defence Advanced Research Laboratory?
No, that's not, no.
No, it's often not the case. Well, they've been working with bees for the last sort of 22 years, and you might go, oh, well, that's nice. Everyone needs a bit of the cool, calming element that beekeeping brings. No.
Not in the way of like hives for veterans, right?
Not at all in that. Like, it's quite the contrary. So, well, maybe not, but the deal there is they're looking at weaponizing things, and they're looking at like how to try to solve problems on battlefields. And the battlefield problem that bees are helping with is just like sniffer dogs can identify things. They've been able to teach bees to identify issues. So when there's we all know how clever and effective bees are at sourcing pollen or nectar from the environment. Same deal here. So they only need like the smallest molecular hint of a pollen in the air to follow it to a source. Same if they're trying to teach them how to look for bombs and explosives.
Well, that's amazing. I got told that they can smell stuff up to 1 kilometre away, and their sense of smells like 100 times more than ours.
Well, they compare it to being very similar to a dog, using that same example. Yeah, and I find that astonishing, but at the same time, not surprising. Bees just have this ability to economize and be efficient in every way possible, don't they?
And here I was thinking that we were just going to put a beehive in a catapult and send it flying over the wall.
Well, we know that's been done too. So I might tell you how
That'll
they
take care of the enemy for a bit.
How does it work though that they only live for 42 days? Like, do the bees then teach the other bees that teach the other bees, or?
Ooh, that's an awesome question, and I don't think that's how it necessarily works in this instance. So have you heard about Pavlov's dog? Like, that's a common thing you learn in like high school psychology or whatever it is. And that's referenced in the article that I'm referring to about the sound of a bell that causes them to salivate because they know that there's a food association thing. They've done the same thing here with the bees. And they've been able to make them associate the smell of bomb ingredients with sugar water. Makes sense, doesn't it, when you think about it? And when they smell sugar water, the first thing that they do is they extend their proboscis. So if they can teach them that if there is an explosive in the environment, that there's also sugar water, they extend their proboscis. All you need is some clever visual camera recognition, and you can go, oh, there's a bomb near here because all the bees have got their proboscis sticking out. And that's how you create bomb sniffing bees. Pretty wild, isn't it? Pretty wild.
They actually recently did the same for COVID too.
I heard that was something that's happening there. Now, I'm not going to share absolutely every bit of this article, but I will post it on Hive Buddy because there's some other crazy things happening on there as well. But certainly an interesting things happening, isn't there?
Very, very, very interesting. And speaking of interesting, I think it's time to speak to our interesting guest, Carmel.
Oh,
what do you reckon?
Couldn't agree more. Thank you, Carmel, so much for coming and joining us. I've got a little bit of a blurb I'd like to read to people for those that haven't come across you before. And it sort of starts back with you almost 10 years ago when you became fascinated with bees after discovering a beehive in a bungalow that you were renting. Is this story true?
Well, I was renting a house and there was a bungalow on the property, yes. And I was doing some spring cleaning and around the side of the bungalow. We never went. So while I was waiting for the hard rubbish collection to enter the calendar, I'll just stuff the branches down the side there. And when I went around there, I noticed these bees, and up on the wall, there was a hole up in the wall. And I noticed there was a wild hive had set up camp in the bungalow wall. Yep.
And just ring the pest exterminator?
No, I was already aware of the colony collapse disorder overseas. So I reported it to the real estate agent and they wanted to send in a pest exterminator. And I went, what? Do you not know what's going on overseas? You can't do that. So I said, look, if I offer to have them removed, can you get someone to pull the wall off? I said, you can't kill these bees. So I rang around to the council and stuff and found someone that could come and do the cutout. And I already had dogs and cats and a fish and chickens. So I figured maybe they wouldn't mind if I kept a beehive there as well. And they said yes. So I kept the beehive. Now,
there's a fatal flaw in your story. So far, you've been referring to that as a beehive, singular, because it didn't stop there, did it? As for most people.
No. I was really lucky in that the estate where I was living, there was another beekeeper and she became my mentor.
Awesome.
And she
that's
said,
good.
I was so blessed and so lucky. Oh my God, I can't believe how it was just landed in my lap. And she went, do you want to come and catch some swarms with me? And I went, yeah. So one hive became two, became three, and then you get addicted, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then I was working at a school at the time, and so I found the bees in November and I had them removed in January because it took me a while to find the right people, and I thought, well, they're not going anywhere. So I spent all of the school holidays, because I was working at a school, I had school holidays, and I consumed YouTube and read books and started talking to people. And there was a Buddhist temple up in Sunshine I was able to visit and start getting some hands-on and learning about the hives. That was Adrian from, I can't remember the name. He was one of the first people to have hives in people's backyards, and he used to ride a rickshaw around Footscray and stuff like that.
A rickshaw.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So so that was how it all kind of started and grew.
And where you've got that to now, there's a lot going on, isn't there? So, I mean, you've got hardly a spare moment in your day, from education to coaching, workshops, doing the honey thing, doing the bee collection, looking after a ton of bees, biosecurity elements to that. You've been big in beekeeping clubs over time, like contributed a lot in that space.
Yep.
And I've got to say it, but super thrilled that you're one of our mentors on Hive Buddies, something that you've done more recently.
Well, again, another gift from heaven, so to speak, that just landed in my lap. You know, as all of us here in Melbourne have been going through lockdowns, and I think, you know, one of the buzzwords for a while was pivot. So,
Right.
Yeah.
let's find a new way of doing this. And you know, beekeeping's quiet in winter time as well. And although at the moment I'm busy with my mentoring and I can do one-on-one, my aim was in wintertime I could go into schools and do talks and workshops and stuff like that. So with every lockdown, all of that disappeared. So I'm like, what else can I do? And then I was looking at my books and I went, you know, my books actually get full and there's only so many one-on-ones I can actually physically fit into a week, plus my own hives, plus all the other stuff. I thought doing a group mentoring means I can help more people. And so I was actually looking to start that myself. And woohoo, here comes Hive Buddy.
Plus, on top of that too, is that, you know, like for people who've got one hive, or, you know, we'll just say one hive, is that you're only kind of learning from one hive. And then, you know, we're lucky in that, you know, say we've got, you know, 40, 50 hives. You know, we're seeing bees and different things all over the time. But, you know, and so having a group mentoring session is essentially you're getting a view into other people's hives, and you get to learn from that as well. So your experience level increases just by listening to others.
Totally. And it's so much more than just a monthly bee club. Like, it really does take it to, you know, people posting in the group and sharing their oopsies and their learnings. And it's like, yeah, not only are you journeying with your own hive, you're journeying with everyone else's hives as well. And it's just, I love it. I love the Hive Buddy platform. I'm so excited. I'm like, you guys already built it. I'll just come along and be a part of it. So I was totally wrapped to join. Yeah.
Awesome.
That's fantastic.
Well, why don't you said before, Carmel, that you've had a pretty wild spring. Tell us more about what's been going on for you.
Oh, look, I'm going to wave the white flag. I surrender.
It's been a bit crazy.
Yeah, well, you know, one of the really early lessons that I learned through my mentor Angela was about swarm prevention and the importance of that, and different things that you can do to stop it swarming. And so for the first 2 years I was like, I can't let it swarm, I can't let it swarm, I can't let it swarm. And little did I know, my first hive was really grumpy and really unproductive. And it was not until I started working with more than one hive I started to notice the differences. And it also then when I kind of stepped up my beekeeping, 2016 was very cold and very wet, and none of the hives did anything that year. But this year in particular, so I've always taught my mentors as well, it's like in springtime, you need to be ready. You need to be ready to be committed from mid-August right through until that summer solstice, until we get to that longest day of the year. It's all about the babies, and it's the hive breathes in, you know, it's breathing in, it's getting bigger and expanding, and until we get to that tipping point where then it becomes all about honey and food for them and getting rid of it, and it shrinks down. So you've got to keep pace with that breathing in process, right? And depending on the queen, the age of the queen, the genetics, what's in the environment, and every season is different. And so I've gone, you need to be checking your hive every 2 weeks. It takes 16 days to make a queen. So you want to get into that hive before that 16 days. This year, forget that. Just forget it. Forget it. I've got young queens that have got spare frames that have come from a split, and they're already making queen cells. And I'm just going, 2 weeks is too late. 2 weeks, where this particular pocket I'm in the western suburbs of Melbourne, 2 weeks is too late. Hives are swarming at day 9 and they've been checked, you know, and it's just like, and we're doing splits and we're running out of equipment. And so it's like, I have a theory though.
Aren't we running out of equipment? The prices of frames have just gone.
Yeah. I have a theory though. I read before winter, I was looking at a long-term forecast and I knew this season would be wet and warm. It's like, that's what the prediction was. And when I started seeing drones and queen cells early August, I went, okay, right. And then as I've been watching this process, and like about 2 weeks ago, I'm going, oh, I don't get this. And then I thought, you know what? A kangaroo can have an embryo, right? It'll be pregnant. But if it's a drought, it'll stay as an embryo. The mother won't develop it into a joey because there's not enough food to sustain that growth, right?
Yep.
And the joey won't be successful, right? I reckon the bees collectively this year, they've gone, the conditions are right, and the hive itself being a super organism, they've gone, this is the year to send out those swarms because the swarms will be successful. And they've decided so long ago, they're going, this is what we're doing. And they've planned ahead because they can feel it. They can. Like, they know how much capped brood they've got. They know how quickly that hive's going to expand. They know what kind of food they're bringing in. And we as humans, we're just going, we're trying to keep up. And it's like, what, we're given boxes and it doesn't matter. We're going to swarm anyway. So that's my theory. The collective, they've gone, this is the year and we're out of here.
We are going to go forth and multiply.
Yep, totally. It's swarm year.
You're like Ryan on the opposite side of Melbourne and a fair way down, more of a coastal setting in that, like, that changes the environmental conditions, the climatic conditions quite a bit. How does your experience this spring with your apiaries compare to what Carmel's talking about?
Mine, I haven't had any swarms come out of mine. In fact, I've had the there has been a lot of swarms, but I put that down to, just people not checking it as regularly. And there's also kind of a lot of new beekeepers, and there's a lot of holiday makers who live down here or don't live down here, hence why their hives are swarmed. But this could be wild ones, whatever. But I've almost found it the near opposite, in that it's like, okay, cool, I'm going to give you that extra box to actually, so you don't swarm. And then, maybe because we're a bit more south, it's gone really cold. And then the next thing I'm doing is, oh crap, now you've got EFB. So, it's kind of disease is kind of crept in. So I've almost had to do the opposite, in just kind of going, look, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out your inner cover. I'm going to let you build into the lid. I'm going to, maybe even just take out just one frame and really just almost get you to swarm before I'm going to put on that next box. And it's probably only now that, it's really kind of warm enough that you can chuck a whole box on, well, down here anyway, a whole box on and not really worry about it. And that's only kind of been in the last, I'd say, few days, to be honest. Up until then, it's kind of like, oh man, I had some really good 10 frame, hives that were just absolutely pumping, and I've moved them, and it was like, oh man, now you're back down to a nuke. It's horrible, heartbreaking.
And I'll ask this question as well, because I'm sure someone else is thinking about it. But when you're giving them that more room and thinking that maybe now's the time that they're ready for that, thinking swarm management, and then the issue with, say, things like European foul brood turning up, why does that extra space result in perhaps a disease like European foul brood turning up?
Do you want to answer that, Carmel? I'm happy to, but you can if you like.
Well, I know that extra space means the bees have to work a lot harder to temperature control that, and so any kind of stress and strain on them, that's going to, like, I mean, we all know, even as human beings, stress and strain reduces our immune system, you know, so that's where problems creep in. I don't know if you've got more to add to that, Ryan.
No, that's absolutely correct.
Because I
and
suppose
probably
something like EFB is just sitting there in many hives, not really causing an impact or a major issue. And it's like you said, it just gets that chance to come up in and when the circumstances aren't as ideal. So it's like the common cold. Most of us probably have it from time to time, and it's gone without even noticing a whole lot. But if you've got depleted colony for whatever reason, that's when it really shows and creates a drama. Is that fair way to put it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, I used to kind of really panic about it. But then, you know, I was chatting with Simeon Valkenburg, and, you know, it was just kind of like, oh, this is a regular thing. This is okay, as long as you take the precautions on it and deal with it, and it's fine. And ever since then, you know, it's just kind of like, oh man, and I pull it back, and I take out the frames, and, you know, I reduce the entrances and do all the right things, and then, you know, a month later, they're back to where they were. It's like, oh, okay, that's okay. We're okay. We can turn this around. So it's not the end of the world, but you just got to watch it.
It's interesting. And I don't know if this is, so maybe EFBs with cold and damp, but I noticed a few years ago when we had the drought, no SEMA seemed to be, it was the stress of there being dearth and no food around, and no SEMA seemed to be a common one.
Right.
So I don't know whether there's some links there between dry and drought and that particular disease, and cold and damp and that particular disease. Touch wood, I haven't had EFB yet.
Hey, you're lucky. Good for you. Just keep it that way.
Well, maybe there's a good moment now to maybe introduce what we're going to discuss with our people tonight. We've just seen so much about swarms, and we concentrated a lot on our last session specifically about that, didn't we, Ryan?
Yeah.
But all of this leads to queens. I mean, we can't ignore the fact that there's a push and play between all the different roles in the actual hive, but the queen is a huge part of it. And any beekeeper is conscious of that one particular bee and all the details surrounding that. And it made sense to carry on from last time and talk a little bit more about queens. And it's at this time of year that a lot of southern beekeepers are thinking about, oh, where am I going to get my queens from to do some to requeen? But we probably need to even back up a bit from that and go, well, won't they just sort it out themselves, or do we need to provide a queen? And if so, do we need to get that from somewhere proper, or how does it get to us, and what do we do with it? How does all that work? It spun me out the day that I found out that they sent bees in the post, and that was in the early days, and I thought, oh, that's completely and utterly ridiculous, but so be it. And then you learn a lot from there. So I'm wondering, let's kick off the discussion and maybe talk about, why do we even need to interrupt the process and think about changing the queen over?
Right. So, you know, if you are, well, especially down here, so swarm prevention, if you're going to do a split, are you going to let it raise its own queen, or is it just easier just to have an actual queen arrive to you in the mail? And at that time of, you know, doing swarm prevention is it's probably not necessarily warm enough to be actually really raising queens. There's plenty of drones around, but it doesn't mean that they're going to get a lot of flight time, because it's, you know, it's you know, too rainy, too cold, whatnot, and, you know, the numbers drop off, and then you're worrying about, you know, population drops off in the hive because there's a lack of a queen, then you're worrying about disease and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of think, I kind of lean towards, well, it's easier to just get a queen, you know, and normally it's from the northern states, because it's warm enough. Buy the queen, get it sent in the mail, do your splits, and then you're ready to rock and roll. That's kind of where I kind of go with it. But having said that, now it's warm enough, and now I'm starting to graft. We're going to start putting them away.
And other suppliers down south here now are making that available as well. So you're starting to see that change from the Queensland, New South Wales, queen breeders, and it's slowly finding its way down here. As you said, we've finally cracked some springtime weather, haven't we? And it gives that opportunity to work with the biology of the insect, so we can actually, be productive in such a way.
But having said that, is that with what's been happening lately with COVID and the backup in Australian Post, you know a bit about this time. You want to talk about it?
Oh, absolutely. And it's kind of a cool story, and it's a little bit of a privilege to have the opportunity to throw it out there. I'm just going to turn off my background. Oh, yeah, I'll do that just so I can give you a demonstration. So those that haven't seen it before, if you order queen bees in the post, like, you're going to get a box. I'm going to just introduce it this way, Ryan. You're going to get a box or some sort of a package, and it's going to look something like this. And there's normally some scary stickers on there. So
cool. Now we know where you live, man.
Yeah, there's that too. I'll do it the other way around. But I know, you know where my post office box is, huh? But then it's even funnier when it goes to the post office, because there's someone who's trying to hold the boxes, as carefully and cautiously as possible, scared out of their brains that there's some bees in there, not understanding what's going on. Now, the reason I got these queens just the other day is up north, they are really worried about the shipping issue with queen bees at the moment. Optimally, they probably wouldn't be in the post for maybe more than 2 or 3 days, would you think?
Yeah, the Australian queen bee breeders are worried about it. Yeah, because the post. Yeah, go. Sorry, Carmel.
We've been waiting 10 or 11 days now, and usually.
Yeah, that's a scary thought that it's going for that long. But so we've done a bit of a test. We've got these little trackers which have temperature in them, and the Hive Guardian trackers know exactly where they are at all times. So they go inside a box like this, and they give confidence to the actual queen breeder, as well as the person who's purchased those queens, exactly where they are at any one time. But with the added benefit that inside this thing, we actually have a temperature sensor, so we can actually see the health and well-being on the journey. And we're in sort of preliminary studies with that. And what's really interesting and encouraging, can I say, is that main bit of the journey, like the 90% of the journey, when it's sort of after you've given it to a post office box and it starts bumping around the back of a truck, all the way through to almost its final destination, it's actually got a really moderated temperature. It's just the van at the other end, or the postie bike at the last 3 kilometres is when we notice the temperature fluctuation. But for the rest of it, it's well within reasonable parameters. Without having done
That's good news.
It is. And without having done that, we wouldn't have known. But most importantly, we can see how long it takes. And this package literally took 2 days from Queensland down just recently, Carmel. So that's like fairly contrasting to your experience.
Yeah.
But we knew exactly where it was. Now, I've sent a package straight back with a Hive Guardian in it to the same queen bee breeder. And it's still not got there, even though it's in an express box post bag. But it's just been fun to do. So what happens is you get this, and inside that, and I haven't had them in there the whole time I've been throwing this box around. Inside there's some air holes. They'll have taped in there something like this. And hang on, I should have held it the other way around. Something like this. Now, Ryan or Carmel, can you talk us through what's going on here? And I'm going to whilst I try and look at the screen and bring it close enough up.
Carmel, you go for it. This is what you're hoping to see tomorrow arrive in your post box.
Hopefully, yes. So there are different types of cages. This one in particular, if you're buying multiple ones, the little tube on the end of it, that has actually fondant in it, which is, so that's icing sugar with glucose. So that serves 2 purposes. One is it's their travel food, so that keeps them alive, and then the other one is it stops them from getting out. So, and then within the cage area, there'll be a queen in there, a newly mated queen, whether open mated or artificially inseminated, and she'll have some attendants in there to help her along.
And I'm counting 7 attendants, 2, 4, 8 attendants, actually.
Wow, that's really generous. That's really generous. Yeah, usually there's between 6 and 8. And so when you put that into the hive, and there's different theories about where you should position them, The the bees inside keep chewing their way out, and the bees inside the hive start chewing their way in. And by the time they meet each other in the middle, they've gotten used to the smell of the queen.
It's quite well aerated, isn't it?
Yeah, and then they generally most of the time they accept her. Yep, and you can give them a little drink of water as well. And also the when you put it in the hive, if they need a drink at any time, the bees inside the hive can, they get to know and smell and touch their little proboscises together and communicate.
And yeah, those little holes, they're big enough for their proboscis to go through and to talk and communicate and share the pheromone. But the other bees can't actually sting through them, so they can't kill the queen in there, which is probably more so one of the really important things. Otherwise, the queen will be bald in 2 seconds if you put her in there without it.
Sorry, Brian. Some of these cages that you've got, they also come, because you've got bulk ones, they come in a tray. Some of them have a little closing cup over the end. So if you put it in the hive, always remember to take that cup off, otherwise the queen can't get out.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you were talking about placement. You sort of started to talk about that. What has someone got to think about when it comes to putting something like this in a beehive to allow that last bit of it to happen? There's lots of theories there. Is there a theory you sort of subscribe to and like to practice in positioning?
Me or Ryan?
Oh, either of you. Go with it.
You go, Carl. Yeah. You're the expert. You're the legend. You go. You tell us.
I have to listen to Ryan every time. I'd like to listen to you for a change.
Awesome.
I can bang on about queens all the time. I'm sure everybody's sick of it.
So let's say these are the frames in the hive. I like to put it in the middle, in usually the bottom box if that's being used nicely with brood. And I will want to put it actually horizontally, because if you put it vertically with the opening pointing down, if it drops down and it lands on the bottom of the hive on its sugar plug, then the bees actually can't get out. Yeah, they're stuck. Yeah. And the other thing too with that is I would put it with the sugar plug on the top rather than on the bottom, because after a while, some of the nurse bees do die off if they have been in travel for a while. And if you've got it with the sugar plug on the bottom and a couple of nurse bees die in front of the plug and they're laying there, again, they can't. So by having it with the sugar plug at the top, any that die will not be able to sit in front of that sugar plug and block up the hole to get out.
Can I ask a question? I don't know if you've contemplated this one before, but it's on my mind and I have no idea. If she's in there right now, her next action is, once she's acquainted with the hive, is to go and get laying, because she's a mated queen. Do you know much about her physiology and what's going on with her body right now? Have you ever thought? I don't know if that's something that most people would think about. But she's not laying in there right now, and she would obviously have the desire to lay many thousands of eggs per day coming up. Thought much about that?
What's coming to me is when the bees go to swarm, they have to, they stop the queen from laying for a few days because they need her abdomen to shrink down so she's not as heavy in weight so she can fly. And they walk her around the hive and stop her from laying any eggs. So maybe
get on that treadmill.
Yeah. Look, it could be a bit like a mother breastfeeding. It's a supply and demand thing. So she would kind of be in a status like, if once she goes and swarms, that laying process has stopped for a few days. And then once conditions are right, then she can start again.
Yep.
So look, they're so incredible. My mind.
Cool question by Shannon. She's just wondering.
I'm going to go with.
Oh, go on.
gonna go with it. Over winter, when she has the ability to stop laying eggs, and she has the ability to stop fertilizing them. Or she has the ability to stop fertilizing them anytime. So essentially, what I'm going to say is that first of all, that there's no cell for her to actually lay in, and secondly, is that there's no conditions for her to actually lay. So physiologically, she can control that whenever she wants.
Yep.
So I think, right now, she's not saying, oh, it's a safe time and a good time to lay and multiply right now.
Yeah, of course, it makes a huge amount of sense. And I just saw that question. You put an answer into the text box there, Carmel. But Shannon was asking about whether all these bees would be accepted by the new colony. And you've just said yes. Generally, the other bees in there would be accepted, and that's because they'll all be working to the same pheromone of the queen and the same smell of the hive. Is that a reasonable way to put that?
Yeah. Yep.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and also further to what Carmel was saying that when she puts her one in, let's go like this. Let's go like that. She puts it in like that in the frames.
Yep.
And so that the plug is at the top, and I put it in like that, and I put it in towards the back end of the brood chamber. And the reason why I put it in towards the back, I like put it in there so that any dead bees fall down. But I put it into the back end of the brood chamber. Well, if I put it above and put it in the super, what happens is then we have a supersedure event, which is, that's you can actually do it that way. You can create a supersedure. Essentially, that's one way of actually breeding a queen, is you just move a frame of eggs up into the super above and away, and then they'll start making cells, and then you can have a supersedure event. So that's one way of requeening, which I don't think is the best way. But if you put it just above, is what can happen as well, is that perhaps not all the bees down below actually get to know the queen, and then when she actually is released, then they'll kill her because that's not her queen, that's not their queen. So I always leave it about 2 to 3 days. The reason why I put it to the back end of the brood chamber is literally I can go to the box, pick up the top box, and I can see whether or not the candy plug has actually been eaten, first of all, and I can then also look inside and see whether or not the queen's come out. Because I've had so many times where I'm like, why is there no eggs in this hive? The plug's out, and I'll look at the cage and I'll go, the queen's still in the cage. She hasn't even come out of the cage. So I'm like, oh man, come on. All right. So I have it at the back. So if I can just kind of pop the top off and if the queen's still in there, she'll come out, and away we go.
And that's Carmel, why I call him Attentive Ryan, because he's got all these details.
Little trick.
May I put these ladies away? Is there any more reference to those at the moment?
Well, I did see someone the other day. I think there was a little round tab on it, and they had put a matchstick, so they'd still pointed it down, but they'd put a matchstick through the cage across and the queen cage hung down from there. So there was no way that it could fall down to the bottom of and I thought, well, that's another way of doing it. And so then the bees could come out through the bottom, and I went, I've not seen that one before. That
would work quite well looking at the structure of this.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. So you're also talking about it not being able to fall.
Yeah.
And one of the is I actually shove it into the wax.
Yeah.
In between the frames. Yeah. So it's kind of squished on there a bit. Yeah.
Totally.
Well, tell us more then about other reasons. I mean, we'll wrap up this in just a moment, but I am just curious about why would the colony itself, and therefore maybe that's some of the triggers of why we would requeen, but why does the colony itself, just remind us, decide to install a new queen themselves, or raise a new queen, I should say? Because it probably links back to some of the reasons why we as beekeepers want to move on a queen and put a new one in?
Well,
Not
I
just
think
not personality based. Oh, it can be personality.
yeah, we as humans do it for personality based, absolutely. That's a reason that we do it and the bees don't do it. I think the bees often will, they, you know, those more defensive hives, they survive really well, you know.
Have you found that those are harder to requeen?
Oh yeah, I had a hive.
What's your experience with them?
I had it. They ended up dying out. I sunk 3 queens into it. I put 2 queens into it, and I gave them 2 frames of brood, and they refused.
Yep.
Well. And then they didn't even start. They didn't even start laying workers either. They just, and I'm like, well, what can I do? What can I do? And it's like, you can only put so much effort in, and it's like they'd made up their mind. No.
Yeah.
So so
I had a mate's hive that was super aggressive.
Yeah.
And I went, oh yeah, I'll requeen this. And this is the only one that this has happened with. And they killed the first queen. And then it was kind of like, oh, okay, cool. All right, well, I'll put in some eggs and stuff for them to make their own with those frames. They somehow made one from somewhere else. I don't know, they stashed an egg somewhere. And they had like this another super angry queen. It was like, oh, well, you've got to go. So I requeened again. And so now this is like the 3rd one. And so that one came out. They let her lay for a little bit, and then they killed her off. And then just slowly didn't do anything. And now it's like, oh my God, okay. So what I've done this time around is I've literally just got a swarm that has been going really well, and it's in a nuke box. And instead of it being in a little cage and for them to, for only 8 attendants to have to deal with, now they've got 5 frames full of bees that they've got to try to deal with. So I just merged them and went, there you go, there's your queen.
Awesome. Wow. Yeah. I know.
You guys, I was going to say, have you guys ever been truly afraid of an aggressive colony? Like, just, I can't go back there. I just don't want to go back there. Have you felt that before?
There was one particular hive that I requeened, and this is when I was working with my first employer that Carolyn was with. And I went once, and the weather was a bit funny. So I went, maybe they're just grumpy because it's the weather, right? Then I went another time. And again, because you're doing mentoring clients and there's a schedule, sometimes you just have to do the appointment. You don't have control over the weather always. And I'm like, all right, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. And they were at me, and they're at my wrists, and they're at my, and I had lace-up boots back then. I learned very quickly to buy some pull-ons. And so it was the gaffer tape. And so I prepared. And so then the 3rd time I went, it was a picture perfect beekeeping day, and they were even worse than normal. And I'm like, right, we need to requeen you. And I did. I wasn't looking forward to it. And I'm like, oh, I've got to requeen. And I'm like, we've got to find the queen. Like, we have to find her. And so me and the client, and we're putting cloth tape around every gap that we could find, just because it was like you almost couldn't see. Almost couldn't see because of all the bees. Fortunately, we found the queen quite quickly because we put her down into one brood box. I kid you not, as soon as we pinched her off, before I've even put the new queen in, I've gone, has their mood changed, or am I just, he goes, no, their mood's changed. And as that minute went past, it was like time stood still. And it was I just went,
wild.
Oh, and it was like, are these even the same bees? I was flabbergasted. I'm like, oh, thank God. Okay. This is Yep, true.
That's how it works, isn't it?
Yeah,
Now,
Oh,
was
that's
amazing.
brilliant.
Was amazing.
I think we're getting towards the pointy end of it all, Ryan. But I just thought I'm just looking through the chat comments here, and I better just address a few comments and the like, just to put it to you. But Frank's gone and asked us a bit earlier in the night if bees in Asia are Asiatic honeybees or European honeybees. And then he's gone on to say, I was in Vietnam and visited a place where they were showing the bees, and they were very calm. What do you think? Asian honeybees, European honeybees?
I think they might have both.
They've got a different name. So Apis mellifera is the European honeybee, and there's two. There's Apis sierra, I think one of them is.
Serrana, yeah.
And then there's another Apis. So they've got two kinds over there. Yeah.
Good question, Frank. We'll
something for us to look up.
Oh, absolutely. That's why we like these sort of questions.
Even within Apis mellifera, which is the European honeybee we have in here in Australia, you've got Carnolians and Italians and Caucasians and then mixed breeds.
Yeah.
They all have different qualities and different personalities within that as well.
Yeah.
You know.
And I noticed, and maybe this will be one of the other points in here, but I'll just go to Jeremy's comment earlier. I think you might have said something about this, Ryan. He's obviously referring back to the bomb disposal bees we discussed earlier, and just saying about how bees can detect disease on people's breaths. And I think you said something about them being able to look at, or being able to detect COVID. That was being looked at. So I guess that's part of what's going on there.
Yeah, and I think probably what's also something rattling around in my brain is I think there was something about cancer as well.
You're right.
Because I know there's something. I think there's something with a change in chemical signature on your breath with particular types of cancer.
There is something in that. We've definitely read it. That doesn't sound quirky enough for me to talk about next week, so I'm going to have to next time. But
we've got to find a quirkier topic. But
now,
before we go, okay, all right. So yes, go. No, you go.
I was just going to say, this is the fun bit where we get to ask Carmel a couple of key questions that we ask all our guest buddies. It's your turn.
My turn.
And the first one here is something along the lines of, what's the biggest mistake or mishap you've ever had when beekeeping? That's the sign of there's too many. I can't remember them all.
No, not too many. I mean, you know, I've had a couple of meltdowns. I think, being aware of temperature is really important, and airflow for bees. But probably one of the most emotional and heartbreaking for me, and this is where getting in and doing your health checks and your spring checks early is important. And that was a case of AFB that I had. Again, luck was on my side. I had moved into the property where I am now, which was a very big property, so I can have many hives here. And there was a canola field across the road. So I had collected all of my host hives, and I went, I'll bring them down. I'll bring them down to feed on the canola. So lucky that there was a good flow on, and all they were doing was heading straight across the road to the canola. Because my strongest hive, I had another hive that was queenless, and I went, oh, well, they need some brood, so I'll put some brood over there. And then I went to do the health check, and then I've pulled up a frame and went, no, that just doesn't look right.
Oh.
And I already knew about the matchstick test, so immediately I've gone, because it's all been theory in your head, right? But until it actually happens and you can apply that stuff, it was an amazing learning. But, you know, the stupidity of me, like, not only did I have one hive, I had immediately affected the other because I'd given it brood so that they could make a queen.
That's
so like, but to then, you know, go through the process of reporting AFB, and then having to get rid of the bees and the hive, and that was a really heartbreaking process. But I did a video of it, and we used it as a learning experience. So it became useful. Beekeeping's such a roller coaster emotionally, isn't it?
Actually,
yeah.
Supposed to be calming and easygoing.
And zen and like not always.
Now let's hit you up with our other question. What's the one thing, if you could only choose one, that you'd like to tell a novice beekeeper?
One thing.
Oh, go on, two. Give us two.
There's probably two that stick out to me. One is it's so rewarding, but be prepared for the commitment, especially between spring and the end of the year, until we get to like those 3 to 4 months. It's like you're doing a sprint and a marathon at the same time, and you want to be prepared for that commitment. If you're not ready for that commitment, then give someone else that responsibility if you really want the bees in your yard. And the other thing too is, with that commitment to the bees and the hive, is to your own ongoing education, and to get excited. There's so much, like, how can you not be excited? And pull in stuff from, do a course, get a mentor, join a club, do something like this, watch videos, read books, but the best thing is check your hives regularly. The bees will teach you so much, and it's great to have all that theory in your head, but to then see it applied and go, because bees do everything for a reason. They don't just flippantly do stuff. They do everything for a reason. So it's like you look in your hive, it's going, what are you showing me? What are you telling me? And your environment, like getting to know your microclimate. So just and attention to detail. Just really watch what's going on, I think. And there's so much learning that will come from that.
They're crackers. Well done. And thanks for sharing that. It's always good to fess up to your your concerns and your problems and your dramas, because the learning is awesome from those, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
Now, we're probably almost a bit too late to throw another question in there, Ryan, but there is one there that I think is worthy of just putting to the brain's trust. Shannon's asked that I've heard about the temperature is not that important, as bees regulate an even temperature. The question is, should beekeepers insulate their boxes in winter? Wow.
Well, it's about, I think it's about population. Population to space is really the issue. If you've got, a full box, or even in an open air hive will survive in the middle of winter if there's enough bees to keep it warm. Insulating your box, that'll help. It'll also help during summer, to try to regulate it. But I think it's probably just more important population to space, so that then they can actually regulate that temperature better.
And you and I have had a bit of a laugh from time to time about how serious beekeepers in Australia get about overwintering, when we don't have a real winter. We don't have a real winter. Like, there's not snow on the ground. There's not negative degree days. There's an amazing presentation I listened to only a couple of weeks ago by a guy who's living up near the Arctic Circle on the Alaska-Canadian border, and he has bees. And they talk about the number of days where they can actually forage up there, and it's a very low number. I can't remember the number. But they would just laugh and think, what are you talking about any of those things down here? But I'll say, Shannon, it really comes down to, you can optimize, look for those efficiencies, and just try new things, see how it works, test it in your own.
It's going to help them. It'll help them. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But I don't think it's the be all and end all.
Well, what a journey we've had tonight with you, Carmel. We've gone all over the place, and it's been a wild ride. But I think, Ryan, that brings us to just about the end.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us, Carmel. It's been absolutely brilliant. Thank you so
My
much.
pleasure. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. It's been great.
Now, we should make sure, Ryan, that we do a session a little bit sooner than later, but people can find out more about our next show by keeping an eye on Hive Buddy, or we do post the shows and the past shows at hivebuddy.com.au/shows. So people can see what's going on there. We can try and keep people focused and up to date there. That's always a good way. And
Are they on YouTube as well?
And they're on YouTube, sitting still under the HiveKeepers YouTube channel. I'll change that at some point so it's its own place, but that's where that can be found. And we love it when our listeners can share it around a little bit, because we've got to be a little bit sensitive about self-promotion, but we love it when people can give us a helping hand and share it a little bit further than it normally can go, so we can try and share the love. I think that's about where we're at, though, isn't it?
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you too, Simon. Greatly appreciated, buddy.
Back to you too, Ryan. Great session tonight. Well done, Carmel, and thanks to all those that have been listening to us. Hope to see you all again.
See you guys. Thanks.
Good work.
Bye,
Take care.
everybody. See ya.